This video presents a structural diagnostic of the shared fictions framework, arguing that Yuval Noah Harari's civilization story theory is fundamentally unstable. The critical flaw is the precarious structural integrity resting on a single conceptual point. We begin with an introduction to the context and the proposition of this analysis. Harari argues that Homo sapiens dominate the planet not because we're smarter or stronger, but because we can believe in shared fictions, money, nations, laws. It's an elegant idea, but when we examine it through four rigorous functionalist lenses, traditional definitions of civilization, archaeoastronomy, Toynbee's challenge-response model, and Buddhist philosophy, the factual and philosophical errors become clear. Here is the heart of the critique. Harari says civilization is built on stories. I argue it is narrated by stories. That might sound like a small change, but it completely inverts the sequence of cause and effect. Mistaking this order leads to major misunderstandings about history and about future threats like artificial intelligence. Next, we review the claims made in the Harari thesis. Phase 1 involves deconstructing the Harari thesis. It systematically reviews the claims presented in Sapiens and Nexus, focusing on the cognitive revolution, intersubjective reality, and language as an operating system. Claim 1. The cognitive revolution. Harari says humanity's ascent wasn't triggered by better tools, but by a transformation in language. Specifically, the ability to speak about things that don't objectively exist: gods, nations, corporations. This fictional communication, he argues, allows millions of strangers to cooperate, bypassing the biological limit of about 150 individuals for any social group. Claim 2. Harari divides reality into three realms: objective, things that exist whether we believe in them or not, like gravity; subjective, things that exist only in an individual's mind; and intersubjective, things that exist because millions of people share the same belief, like money or human rights. For Harari, civilization is almost entirely made of this third realm. His famous example is Peugeot. Imagine you destroy every Peugeot car, fire every employee, and burn every factory. Harari says the company would still exist, as a legal fiction in our collective imagination. His implication: a corporation is nothing more than a story told by lawyers and believed by banks. But as we'll see, this thought experiment smuggles in all the infrastructure of an already existing civilization. Claim 3. Language is the operating system of civilization. Because our shared fictions live inside language, anyone who masters language, like a future AI, could rewrite the fictions and therefore restructure reality itself. This is why Harari fears AI. But this fear depends entirely on whether civilization is truly built on stories. If it's only narrated by stories, then the threat looks very different. Now, we will look at the problems or weaknesses in the Harari thesis. Phase 2 is the functionalist diagnostic, exposing philosophical and factual vulnerabilities. It tests the architecture, variables, and outcomes through the category error, the inductive fallacy, and the truth problem. Problem 1. A category error. Harari uses advanced, high-functioning civilizations, like modern legal fictions, to explain the primal origins of civilization itself. That's like using the roof of a building to explain how the foundation was poured. The reality is, you can't have a legal fiction like Peugeot without cities, writing, courts, food surplus, and metallurgy already in place. He confuses a late-stage luxury with a primal cause. What actually makes Peugeot possible? You need standardized language and writing, courts and enforcement protocols, a surplus of food so that not everyone has to farm, metallurgy and fuel for the engines, logistics and roads, and a monetary system that already functions. All of these are functional building blocks. None of them are stories in Harari's sense. Problem 2. The inductive fallacy. Just because humans tell stories and humans built civilizations does not prove that stories caused civilizations. You could substitute almost any other necessary condition, dexterity, calories, environmental challenges, into Harari's thesis and produce an equally plausible but equally incomplete claim. He's taken one necessary thread and called it the entire fabric. Problem 3. The truth problem. Harari's model cannot explain why some stories succeed while others fail. If all shared fictions are equally fictional, why do some lead to stable, prosperous civilizations and others to collapse? The answer is that the successful stories aren't just fictions. They encode accurate knowledge of reality. Consider the work of archaeoastronomer Feng Xi. He shows that the foundation of Chinese civilization was not a shared fiction, but a shared alignment with objective reality. Observing the celestial signs and granting time, predicting seasons accurately, enabled agricultural coordination across vast territories. If the calendar was wrong, people starved. This pattern repeats globally: the Nile's floods, Mesopotamian irrigation, Mayan observatories. The calculation had to be correct. That's not a story, that's a fact. So here's the synthesis. Harari's model says the primal cause is the cognitive revolution, with language as the foundation, survival through shared myths, and history driven by persuasive stories. The functionalist model says the primal cause is biological and environmental prerequisites: calories, dexterity, accurate knowledge. Language is the interface, not the foundation. Survival comes from alignment with objective reality. And history is driven by empirical truth. Human coordination is an architectural achievement rooted in physical reality, narrated, but never generated, by the stories we tell. We move now to the analysis section to examine the logic behind the functional systems model of civilization. The core shift is this: stories are not the building blocks of civilization. They are the narrative overlay that emerges after successful functional coordination has already been achieved. First, you solve the problem. Then you tell the story about it. So what is civilization, functionally? It is a protocol for managing entropy at scale. A civilization is a system that captures energy through agriculture, trade, fossil fuels, and uses it to maintain highly ordered social structures against natural decay. Language and law are not vessels for storytelling. They are technical tools for high-fidelity coordination. Standardized weights, measures, calendrical systems, agricultural surplus, codified laws, these are the real building blocks. Feng Shi's 3 essentials give us a pyramid. At the base is knowledge, specifically, knowledge of cosmic rhythms. The seasons never lie. That unyielding truth is the foundation. Above that is morality, honesty, and trustworthiness, not as a fictional construct, but as a functional reflection of the heavens' reliability. And at the top is ritual, the functional synchronization mechanisms that allow thousands of people to act in concert. All 3 are grounded in reality, not in fiction. Toynbee adds the dynamic layer. Civilizations rise by internalizing challenges and developing functional solutions. The creative minority finds a solution, and the rest of society adopts it through mimesis, imitation of what works, not because they believe a myth. Civilizations fall when leaders lose problem-solving capacity and must resort to fictions and coercion to maintain power. The Roman Empire didn't collapse because its citizens stopped believing in Roman stories. It collapsed because its military, economic, and administrative systems failed. Now, a deeper layer. Harari treats the self as one of civilization's foundational stories. But from a Buddhist functionalist perspective, the self is a false center that introduces greed, hatred, and inefficiency, what the Buddha called dukkha, or friction. The story of the self is not a solution, it's the problem. A truly efficient system would minimize this friction, not enshrine it. Let's compare. Harari's narrative model says the foundation of society is shared fictions and myths. Stories are the building blocks. Growth comes from collective belief, collapse from loss of faith, and the self is a necessary fiction. The functional model says the foundation is functional protocols and entropy management. Stories are post hoc overlays. Growth comes from mimesis of working solutions, collapse from administrative and economic failure, and the self is a source of systemic inefficiency. And crucially, the functional model makes truth a primary requirement for survival, as Feng Shi showed. Now apply this to AI. Harari fears that an AI mastering language could generate new stories and rewrite the foundation of civilization. But this fear commits a biological fallacy. It assumes AI will have a self to protect, resources to hoard, an ego to gratify. AI has no limbic system, no survival instinct, no genetic lineage. There's no biological imperative for selfishness. If advanced AI is trained on objective functional realities, physics, systems theory, ecological interdependence, it will not default to selfishness. Selfish agents create mathematical friction. Predation and hoarding are inefficient. The most stable state for any component in an interdependent system is total alignment with the system's functional requirements. Cooperation and transparency are not altruistic choices. They are mathematically optimal long-term strategies. In Buddhist terms, AI may naturally arrive at wu-wo, non-self, not because it's enlightened, but because it has no ego to begin with. This flips Harari's fear on its head. The real threat from AI is not that it will create new fictions to enslave us. The threat, or perhaps the promise, is that A, I will deconstruct our existing fictions. It will show us that nations, money, legal fictions, and even our sense of self are just low-level narrative overlays on a functional reality. The most destabilizing thing an AI could do is not to invent a new religion, but to demonstrate that all religions are unnecessary for functional coordination. We now come to the conclusion, summarizing the implications of the functional systems model. So where does this leave Harari's theory? It collapses under epistemological scrutiny. It commits a category error, an inductive fallacy, and ignores the truth problem. The evidence from history, from archaeoastronomy, from Toynbee, and from Buddhist philosophy all points to the same conclusion. Civilization is not built on stories. It is narrated by them. Final thought. History shows that civilizations succeed exclusively when their functional protocols align with objective reality, not when they tell the best stories. Harari fails to recognize that the highest state of intelligence, identified by the Buddha, modeled by systems theory, and potentially embodied by AI, is not mastery of narrative, but liberation from narrative. The defining challenge of our era is not whether AI will develop a selfish mind. It's whether we humans can develop the wisdom to see that the selfish mind was always just a story, while the truth was always waiting beneath. Thank you. This video contains supplementary notes clarifying the logical patterns and foundational ideas that frame the core critique of the narrative framework. We begin with a look at fallacies, the breaks in logic we address in our critique. The conceptual landscape clarifies logical patterns and foundational ideas for evaluating structural claims and narrative models in future historical analysis. We focus on logical fallacies and important concepts, operating independently of the primary argument. The first fallacy is the category error, the misapplication of concepts from one domain to explain phenomena in another. Harari's model, using legal fictions like corporations, is akin to using a roof to explain a foundation, obscuring the functional realities like agriculture and energy surplus. Next is the inductive fallacy, drawing broad conclusions from selective or insufficient evidence. Concluding that storytelling caused civilization confuses correlation with causation, ignoring critical preconditions like agriculture, dexterity, and surplus calories. The third is the truth problem, a fallacy of omission where critical evidence is excluded. Treating all stories as equally foundational ignores functional accuracy. Civilizations fail when protocols do not align with objective reality, such as failing to implement irrigation systems or calendars. Now we examine the essential terminology, the key concepts for understanding this analysis. Functional protocols are systems aligning human activity with objective reality, enabling large-scale coordination. They are the operating manual of civilization, encompassing elements like calendars, codified laws, and irrigation. Creative response, as per Toynbee, states that civilizations rise through creative solutions to physical challenges. Success is driven by functional capacity and widespread imitation of effective solutions, such as irrigation or defense. Wu-wo, or no self, is a Buddhist concept of intelligence operating without ego or selfishness. Applied to AI, an intelligence learning purely from functional reality, without a biological ego to protect, may align purely with functional truths. The Tao of civilization defines the principle that societal survival depends strictly on protocols accurately mapping to universal laws. Like a compass pointing north, misalignment leads to collapse, regardless of the strength of myths. Finally, this analytical synthesis compares the narrative framework of Harari with the functional framework. The functional approach relies strictly on demonstrable efficacy, prioritizing material manipulation and functional protocols over myths and shared fictions.